Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Dynasty Dingers podcast. Joining me, as always, is Doc today. It is Monday, July 8th. We are recording about noon Eastern time. We do have a very special guest yet again on the show, but before we welcome our guest, Doc, what's going on?
Oh, man, it's all going on. I got my Bobby Witt Jr. Team USA shirt here. We recorded, I think, our last one on a Monday last week.
It was weird, yeah.
It was like an American week, though, and every day is Independence Day for me. If you ever noticed the obnoxious amount of flags behind me and so forth. So yeah, I hope everyone had a good one. Kept all your fingertips and other appendages. It was a great time had by all over here. So good to be back. Good to have a Chris Knock here. Dude's a stud.
Yeah, so
the second half, he actually messaged me really freaked out. He said, "You had Drew on and not me. This is not fair." He started having a tantrum.
It was heartbreaking.
Well, and I think the fun thing of having that was we naturally got you guys spaced out, where I think, Doc, we probably wanted them, back to back if we could have, but Doc and I are not the most organized. We enjoy doing this and we want to continue doing this, but we haven't hit our stride yet. So it's kind of like, who's on the agenda this week? And then hopefully we get to them.
Well, it seems from my point of view, you guys are in your stride. You guys are doing a heck of a job.
Hell yeah. We love that, Chris. Well, Chris, welcome to our wonderful, very high production show. Doc is definitely the talent and the good-looking representation of our model shirts for Bobby Witt. I am just here to try to make sure things stay on course. Chris, you are co-host of the Join the Ranks podcast, senior writer for Dynasty Guru as well. Give us a little bit of information about how long you've been doing fantasy baseball content and, essentially why you still like it.
Oh, yeah, man. I think there's a litany of reasons why we all love our Dynasty baseball. But I've been playing fantasy baseball, I won't say exactly my age, but for 20 some years now. And so it was the natural progression, I think, as with most, moving into the Dynasty space. And for the last 10, 15 years almost, I've been playing almost exclusively Dynasty, and started writing with TDG 3 years ago, right after the pandemic, I believe. And it's just kind of been something I like to, it's the hobby to my hobby, I like to say. And I don't know, you meet cool people, getting to know people, both. This is our first time meeting face to face, but also just chatting in the rooms and everything like that, just talking about the sport we love.
Yeah, hell yeah. Well, and you joined the ranks is going to be ironic here. It wasn't meant to be a pun there, but you joined the many followers that enjoy fantasy baseball and either live in or are from the Midwest. Doc, myself, joined that as well. It's kind of odd, and I think it kind of creeps Doc and I out when we actually talk about it. Doc, what's going on right now? You having fun in Indiana? Is it hotter than shit?
That's cussing on the podcast now. Listen,
weekends.
That might have been our first.
Spotify doesn't allow, or does not. What's the word? Does not ask us if there was explicit content, unlike RSS and Podbean, which is very weird.
But now our listeners who've been listening since day one, they're gonna be like, "Oh, it's the PG-13 movie moment. They got their one in. They did it."
Maybe it'll give us more YouTube views now that it's not for children.
We kind of had our hot streak, our hot, hot heat a couple weeks back, and now it's like 90, 80s. It's like whatever. It's humid out here. It's not the same as Vegas. And I'm a little hot right now because I turned off my fan and my AC, as we noticed by my brain melting right there. But we had a good moment all the same. I'm feeling good, man. We should mention that, Chris Knock here is heading up. It's not in our outline. One of I would say the most unique league that I'm playing in. Chris, I'm gonna say it right now. Chris Knock is a nerd, and I love that because apparently
yes, it's a positive on our show. We use that as a complimentary term.
Believe me, go and talk to.
I'll take the crown.
Go talk to our women. Go to talk to our children about any dynasty team and our passion toward these prospects. They're all gonna think we're nerds. They're gonna know. But Chris takes it to another level. I know he loves these complex leagues, and he heads up one. With it punning his name in the name of the league, the School of Hard Knocks, which I just respect to no end. Tell them a little bit about that league and maybe about some of the funky stuff you do out there.
Oh yeah, man. So yeah, I commission a handful of leagues. This is definitely the most complicated of them. And it just like any good drug addict, you always want more. And so
Amen.
you always want something, you're chasing that next high. And so when regular 30-man leagues aren't crazy enough, I tried to ratchet it up, as you say. So this is a league where we only acquire our major league roster as prospects. It's a 25-man league. And when we did the startup this past off season. It was a little bit of a break in that definition. And we allowed rookie eligibility to be drafted just to start the ball rolling for competitive sake. But everyone else from then on, after that draft, was only by 0 at-bats or 0 innings pitched, official records. And we're half the season in. It's slow and sure, but it's fun. The league winner is going to be Emerson Pereira or someone like that coming in the last month and going on a power binge probably. But
yeah, just to give the folks at home an idea, like, so if you didn't pick up on any of that, I thought it was said pretty clearly. Basically, you don't have a starting roster until they're in the majors. Like, you can only pick a prospect. So, for example, my team, my only hitter, oh, come on. Fantrax is so silly sometimes, My only hitter is Jordan Beck, who I got for like a day, and he was bad, and then now he's hurt. But I'm happy to have him because he's my only hitter. And then my only pitchers are Hayden Birdsong, dude's a stud. We put him on the outline. Adam Kloffenstein and Anthony Maldonado. Like, it's going to be greasy times, my friends.
yeah.
They also let me steal the entire 2020 for draft class somehow. I think their values weren't baked in yet, I got like Thomas White and Walters and like all Noble Meyer. I got all these Clemmy, all these guys their values have climbed since. So I'm just my flex there. But
I also like how you just mentioned and this isn't a bad thing, but you mentioned 3 or 4 of the high schoolers, which will take even longer to reach the majors in that league. But it's also pretty incredible that you got all of the high school arms.
Well, yeah, 25-man league. Yeah.
They all kind of fell in a row to you. I remember during that startup draft, you're like, I guess I'll twist my arm once again.
Oh, darn, I have to take Thomas White. This stinks. Yeah, Doc, we know how much Thomas White means to you and is playing very well this season too, by the way. Just continues.
Loving it. Very nice. For every BS2, we have a Thomas White.
In this league, you guys there's no pickups, right? Like, there's no waiver wire.
Well, there is, but you have to just pick up other prospects.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. And once they're on your roster, they're there for life. That's a huge
on your active roster. Your
active. Once they're in the big leagues.
So there's
you can't drop them.
No trades, no drops.
You can drop, but if they, have a resurgence 3 years later, you're sad and no one else can have him because he's played some major league.
There's limitless roster spots, correct?
Okay. So you guys aren't hampered by the fact that maybe on a 26-man roster, Jordan Beck is dragging and you have somebody to come up. That's fine.
I have a 300-man bench, so we'll be good.
400 if you really want, I guess.
Anyway, I could talk about that league all day.
Yeah. I mean, and so then we have a mix of Scout the Stat Line writers, TDG guys, some Prospects Live guys, some TDG Discord members are in there. So a nice little mix. Some of my buddies from my home league are in here because they're about as nerdy as I am. So
right.
We all are like-minded. 25 of us in here.
So, Chris, before we get into the reason why everyone is listening to our show today, the actual players and the opinions on those players, when you look at the leagues that you're in, we just talked about the league that you're commissioning and that you created. Do you prefer a dynasty format that is more challenging in regards to having contract implications, salary implications, moving pieces in the back end, or do you prefer more of a draft, keep them forever, make it simple, our traditional dynasty?
I'm a traditional guy, I guess, in that sense. Contracts, it seems crazy, but I like I like the craziness to be in identifying, maybe not as much the valuation.
Okay.
That's my short answer for you.
Yeah. Yeah, because if you're doing contracts, you will, to what you were just saying, you're playing into timing as well, not only just talent, right? I think some of the young kids this year, Jackson Churio in particular, right? If you have him on a contract just in your dynasty league, you're probably not going to reap the rewards of having him as if you had him forever, say his prime years, right? Is
Yeah.
that kind of what you were getting into there?
Yeah. I do have one keeper league that assigns contract years. There's no value, but it's just you can, choose the length of a contract year and you have a set amount of contracts you can hand off. I like that league, but exactly, it feels like you might be spinning some wheels with those Jackson Churio contracts. Whereas in a dynasty, theoretically, oh yeah, this year wasn't quite as valuable as I was hoping, but I don't have to worry about him disappearing on me anytime soon unless I want to move him. So yeah. Yep.
Yeah. The concept of, okay, well, we'll just get him next year since we have him forever. Well, let's break into it. First topic I wanted to talk about today is Ben Rice. Doc, you had a little snippet on Twitter that you talked about Ben Rice and his emergence. Big week last week for the Yankees. Those of you listening, Ben Rice, formerly a catching prospect, playing at first base for New York right now with Anthony Rizzo out, 25 years old. So we have a little bit of a late emergence, kind of building off what we just talked about there, Chris. So I wanted to ask both of you, what is your future projection for Ben Rice? Are you buying into the hot week that he just came off of? And do we think this is the first baseman for the future of New York? Doc, I'll let you start.
Yeah, I think he is the first baseman of the future for New York. It's so easy to say that after a 3-home run game, right? We got that recency. Yeah, dude. I mean, here's the thing, though.
Yes, the bias.
I love that, dude. We need more 25-year-old, 26, 27, 28, whatever. We need these guys to break out later because now I get to pick them up in leagues where I missed out on the initial prospect buzz, on the hype on him, because that was his thing, right? It was like, he looks pretty good, but he's older. What if this is just inflated stats against, younger competition? Well, even before the 3-home run game, there were no thoughts of dropping him because he had a really good OBP. I play in a lot of on-base leagues, and he was crushing it there. I'm not sure how his average is going to do. I'm not sure if he's a tremendous contact guy, really, but I don't know if it matters if he's going to be mashing. I believe he is a left-handed bat. We know that that short porch in Yankee Stadium is pretty friendly. So, I mean, he's batting leadoff, by the way, because Volpe struggles have just been reaching kind of a crescendo, which is a fun word to say. And so they tried him out at the top. And I mean, if you're getting on base all the time, why not lead off? Even if you're not the fastest dude, I don't think he's going to steal any bases. But you don't want a guy stealing bases when you got that machine of like Soto and Judge. You got this behemoth lineup and these mashers who are going. How many runs is he going to get if he keeps that leadoff spot? And he's currently catcher eligible. When Chris is talking here, I'm going to go and see if he's actually been getting any catcher reps in the bigs. I don't believe he has, but I could be wrong. If he can maintain that catcher status, oh boy.
Yeah, I was gonna say we need it. We need at least, I don't know if Fantrax and it's league specific, but we need a couple at least for him to keep that for next year, to keep that cheat code relevance.
I think he's relevant for fantasy regardless, but that would be just even sweeter.
Yeah, I think he's got. I was already, while you were talking, I was double checking that, and he has played 1 inning. I don't know. I think most Fantrax leagues look at games, so I think that counts as 1, and they are league specific. Speaking from my experience as ex-commish, the standard I think for Fantrax is 10 games.
10 sounds right, Chris? Yeah.
But that can obviously be adjusted. Maintaining that catcher eligibility definitely puts him a lot higher in a startup or redraft conversations. But yeah, I mean, everything Doc's saying, left that short porch and left, batting early in that lineup, the non-traditional kind of leadoff hitter. The future is here, I believe. Rizzo's unfortunate injury again after his injury and the concussions last year. I think it's just a matter of time, unfortunately, before it's officially handed off to Ben Rice.
It's fun. I thought of the concept last night. Our excitement for Greg Bird for the number of years that we had never came to fruition, and now we have Ben Rice coming up, kind of similar, right? A little bit older, same side of the plate, kind of a similar profile from what I remember of Bird, and yet hopefully this can be the new Yankees first baseman. They've been waiting for, I mean, I can't remember the last like long standing Yankees first baseman. Can you guys?
Uh,
I mean, I'm thinking like 20 years. I mean, Mark Teixeira, maybe?
Yeah, that's who.
There was pretty
that long.
solid.
It depends on what you're calling long.
I was gonna say though that there was another bird type of guy, Mike Ford. Remember him?
Ford, yeah.
That was the other chosen one.
Well, Voit as well. And I mean, I think it probably goes Voit and then Teixeira.
Voit was sick. I liked him. He was pretty good for a couple of years there.
I mean, I think he led the league in home runs for COVID. Yeah. Okay, moving on. Chris, I have two players I'm very curious to get your opinion on. One of which, Doc, I want you to chime in on. The other, I don't, because we talked about him the last 2 weeks. So I'm going to start with that player. That's Davidson De Los Santos for the Arizona Diamondbacks. Chris, I have done a deep dive into De Los Santos. I am not a believer that this will translate to the major leagues. What is your thoughts on him as a prospect?
I loved him at the beginning of the season when he could have been had for almost free. In that acquisition cost, I guess, concept. Now I think a lot more hype has caught up to him and what he's been doing. Genio just had a heck of a week himself, so who knows if they're really going to be riding that, handing it off anytime soon. Waller is back, and I think they played him at third base the other day. So one of the things I look at is what is an org telling me? Yep. And they let him go in the 40-man, or I'm sorry, in the Rule 5. Didn't add him to the 40-man. Let him go in the Rule 5. Only came back to the Diamondbacks because the Indians decided to not continue with him. And then so now we have this other competition where they're playing other players ahead of him still. He has that swing and miss game, or aspect to his game. Sorry, I'm worried about my wife. She's leaving right now, and I don't want my phone to be picked up on the Bluetooth. One of those technology. Right? All right, she's gone. All right.
It's okay, Chris. When I record on Tuesday nights, my wife calls me, or used to call me religiously, and I've recorded for 4 years. It would always throw our recording off. Yeah. For 4 years. It was fantastic.
This became a staple of the podcast at one point.
I'm glad I'm fitting right in then. So yeah, I think there's a lot of signs outside of his actual baseball risk profile that put me a little bit on watch. I would not pay the current market price for him probably, but if you have him rostered, I think he's could be a viable, he could end up having a career similar to Suarez, have an offensive season or two, like his big seasons with Cincinnati. So I'm not buying, but I'm not looking to move, and it's a hesitant roster. How's that?
I think that's the right answer. Doc, are you staying pat on what we had talked about last week with just kind of emulating and taking what Chris just said as our own opinion as well? We're not overly excited, but we'll kind of see what happens. Is that where you're at as well?
Yeah, man. I mean, I think I've said my bit on De Los Santos is that, hey, the more he hits home runs, the more impressed I am, PCL or not. That's great. It's excellent. And, I wasn't really – he's got that profile. I don't really – I do see some concerns in, like, if he goes cold, it's going to be really cold. Like for John Kensky, Noel.
Big Christmas.
Yeah. Johnny Christmas.
Is that what they're calling him as a nickname? Is Big Christmas?
Calling him Johnny Christmas, dude. Hey, Johnny Christmas up to bat. Yeah, there you go. Honestly, that sells jerseys. I'm gonna have to talk to his anyway. So
we're sticking firm on De Los Santos, right? We're just gonna continue to monitor it. But
if he comes up, and I think his hype has gone to higher levels than even Noel's was for some reason. Maybe it's the Cleveland thing. They don't really do sexy bats usually. But I was able to pick up Noel off of a bunch of shallower waiver wires and free agents.
I think it would have to be age. I mean, Noel is almost 24. Santos just turned 21.
Yeah, that's a good
right. I think it's just got to be the fact that people think there's probably more progression with Santos.
I guess they seem like kids to me either way. But regardless, I see them both as the same kind of guy. I said Chris Carter as a comp for De Los Santos before, and that like an upside downside thing. Like, I mean, I guess that would be mostly a downside. And then Franmil Reyes, was easier with the Cleveland Guardians situation. That can be a great thing. Franmil Reyes at his peak, that's good. Franmil Reyes at his bottom, we don't want that. So I typically go for guys who are more sturdy on base options. Like I was way more excited about Ben Rice coming up. And just to do a presidential debate thing real quick, I'm going to go back to the other question. So I forgot one little cap, a beautiful button, and it's the romance of baseball thing with Ben Rice. He grew up in Massachusetts, but his parents were Yankees fans. And then now he's playing for the Yankees, and he launched 3 home runs against the Red Sox. When he was just getting bullied, whatever, getting rizzed on, jizzed on, whatever. Man, this is the X-rated.
I hope not, but you never know.
What. This episode, we're scrapping it. This one's done. We are no longer PG-13. That sucks. Okay, so point is, he was not getting. We
have a whole new audience, Doc. Yeah,
he was not getting. Hey, folks, we got your attention now. Point being, really cool story. And honestly, it's there's no statistical analysis, no formula behind it, but at that kind of moment makes me feel like, dude, I think he might be that first baseman of the future. And with these guys, we'll find out. They're probably first baseman long term. We'll find out. These guys, hey, we might be talking about the future at Dynasty Fantasy first base right now, even by accident.
Well, I mean, Cleveland has more first base prospects. If we were to add Noel to that. That group, I mean, the list is long, right?
Yeah.
Manzardo, Ralphie,
Kafis.
Yeah, Kafis. I mean, goodness, they're gonna have a log jam.
Send Manzardo somewhere else, dude. I love him. I want him to get some playing time.
Yeah, I mean, they are in the running, so I could see them moving one or a couple of these guys this year if they need to. Moving on to the next name. That's going to be Jacob Wilson. Wilson taken in the 2023 MLB drafts. I think left out of a lot of FYPDs from what I saw, just because he was very contact first approach, having a massive season this year, leading the minor leagues in average easily, starting to show a little bit of power at AAA and the PCL for the Oakland A's. Chris, I wanted your opinion on Wilson. Has the last couple of weeks or the last month changed your opinion on his stock in Dynasty? Were you out of the gates excited about Wilson? Where are you at, and what are you projecting moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen chatter about him being considered a top 50 prospect at this point. And that's kind of my reaction, Doc. I don't fully agree with it. Yeah, he's had, like you said, a hot couple weeks in the PCL, right? And so take that. He's got the hit tool. That is no doubt, right? I mean, the guy, he doesn't decide whether he's going to take a pitch or swing at a pitch. He decides if he's going to take a pitch or hit the ball. So he can do that with no problem. I think, Oakland's had a hole at shortstop. We're talking about long-term problem positions. Oakland's had a hole at shortstop since what? Mickey Tejada?
Yeah, I was thinking Tejada.
So I think they're pretty thirsty for a shortstop. This guy can play shortstop. He's not a small guy, so there shouldn't be a big surprise that he has some power in that tank. But the Coliseum will eat that up. It's a lot of pull side power too. I think it's like 50% pull. I don't think he's going to all of a sudden be a 20 plus home run hitter. I'm not that bullish on him right now, but I think he's showing he'll probably have a solid floor, playing defense, going to be able to play every time. I think he's going to be worth a top 150 prospect in most leagues, just because he'll have the leash and the floor of hitting the batting average leash. But I just wouldn't expect some revolutionary pop-up prospect gonna take the world by storm sort of thing.
So are you selling right now with what you had just said to kind of start the fact that he's pushing top 50s because of the excitement recently?
Yeah. So yeah, I did not chase him in any FYPDs. I don't roster him anywhere. So if I did, theoretically, I think now would be a time I might start trying to shop him for sure. Yeah.
Doc, what do you think? What's your thoughts on Wilson so far?
Well, I'm happy I was able to plant that verb in Chris's head there. He said that the Athletics are thirsty for a shortstop as I was guzzling a water bottle. Viewers at home might pick up on that genius.
The cue there.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So kind of the same deal. I actually, it depends on what you consider a top 50 prospect, right? So at what point is a basically guaranteed 10-year major league career worth something, considering how many top 50 prospects won't really stick in the bigs. So, but it's a weird thing for fantasy. This is the kind of guy I thought Brooks Lee. I'm still not really fully in on Brooks Lee, but I thought Brooks Lee was
pick one
though.
The same kind pick one. Brooks Lee. If you got a roster one of them.
Brooks Lee, I rostered because I'm seeing more power showing up. I don't know how real it is. I don't know how. Is it 20 or is it 15? That's kind of a big difference for me. It sounds small, but is it more than 20? Because he's been on a hot streak lately. I don't know how, he was in. Yeah, I saw some statistics about how maybe we still don't expect 25 or 30, definitely not 30, but not. We're getting in the weeds here. Point is, we're not even having that conversation with Jacob Wilson. We're like, dude, can he get 10? 15 would be great. I think the upside you're looking for with Jacob Wilson is White Arias, White Luis Arias. If he can get into that obscene 300 something average, maybe a close to 400 OBP, that plays. It's a very much like a roto specialist kind of guy. But given the cost and the roster spot you need to stash him, I'd rather have someone with more all-around upside, someone who has that, they're getting on base and there's some power or there's some speed or ideally there's all three, right? And I think White Arias is something that's been sticking around in my head as and that's fine. And I would say, I don't know where I had him on my ranks. I don't think I had him on my ranks, which shows you that
he's out of my top 100 too.
No, he probably. No, I think he has to be in my top 100. I'm going to look this up, but that's my basic idea is that high floor, low ceiling. Agree with you.
Yeah, and I think it is really important for us to be mindful too. We're all in agreement here, but I try and remind myself with the very few prospects that Oakland has that they will be presumably playing in Las Vegas, higher altitude. We will finally have, a real second to Colorado as Arizona used to kind of be. But that's 3-4 years out. Wilson will be probably 3 years into his career at that point. So we might be able to see a little bit more power sucked out of his profile once he hits Vegas. But I don't think the most of us are playing Dynasty with the concept of, how will our backup shortstop be performing in 4 years? So I do think it's interesting that his exit velocities at AAA are coming in at 86.8. That kind of goes into the power not to be expected, as you had just talked about. Okay, moving on, gentlemen. We are going to play a fun little game, and I kind of want you to elaborate on each player if you would like to. If not, just pick who you would like here. It's going to be a little would you rather segment for Dynasty. So I'm going to name 2 players. You have to pick ultimately who you would rather have on your Dynasty roster. I am going to start with you, Chris, and then Doc, you go ahead and follow. First tandem is Joey Ortiz from Milwaukee, presumably the shortstop of the future once Adames leaves, or Colt Kieth at second base. So I guess this question would be middle infield or just in general. Chris, who would you rather have?
It's a tough one. Entering the season, I think I definitely would have been on the side of the majority with Colt Kieth. He's had some ebbs and flows this year. I don't think it's been a complete downer of a season by any means. I think, but right now I think Ortiz, Drew had said it earlier this year in our podcast. Has there been a less praised 130 WRC plus player? He's just keeps sneaking around basically, except for when people start talking about him, they're like, oh, he's so awesome, but really you don't ever see, oh, I'm trying to trade for Joey Ortiz. So I would rather have Joey Ortiz right now, I think. But I think my actual answer is going to be, I would rather, if I had to acquire either, I would try and acquire Joey Ortiz because I think that cost is going to be less. And I think the output is going to be at peak similar to Colt Kieth's. And right now, probably more consistently good, other than his injury.
Doc, what you got?
Kieth, sticking with my boy. The power hasn't quite showed up the way we thought it would. But these are different human beings. If in case you thought they were actually the same person, no, no, but they're different ball players, man. 5'9", Joey Ortiz, 180, 183. And then you got this 6'2", 215, big dude, kind of like more of a Nolan Gorman second baseman in terms of size. Now, and that also leads to differences in their upside. I think there's more power. We saw it this week. I faced Colt Kieth in a head-to-head league this week, along with Brenton Doyle. I'm like, dude, what's going on? Even Charlie Blackmon hit a home run against me. I'm like, what is this? 2013? Come on now.
Just be thankful you didn't also play Ben Rice.
I had Ben Rice, and I still lost the home run category. So what does that say?
Head to head.
I love it though. So I lost with a 293 average, but I won with I beat a 309 ERA. I beat that. I was sub 3. So anyway, Hayden Wisniewski came back. Anyway, Hayden Birdsong. So the young guys are coming out to play. I like Keith's upside. He's starting to turn a corner here. He basically got half his home runs this last week or so. So the Savant, Savant's interesting, right? I love Joey Ortiz. Looks like a major leaguer, as you said, second. He's an infielder of the future wherever they want to put him, really. But here's something the other aspect of the different human. 3 years older. He's 25.
Correct. Yeah.
What are we talking about? We keep talking about on this podcast the underrated nature of like the 25 plus breakout, right? And so Joey Ortiz is entering his prime potentially, or just getting there. Colt Kieth is a kid. He's 22. And he's been, as Chris said, it's been a really weird year because 366 batting average, OBP, 318, or I'm not sure actually what that is right now. No, that's expected BA. I'm on friggin' Savant here. Okay, 244 batting average. Okay, OBP sub 300. That's not okay. But I think these numbers I know these numbers are on the increase right now. They're on the rise after some really rough stretches, as you would expect from a 22-year-old. I still think the upside for fantasy is higher with Kieth. If I was a GM and I needed the safest bet, I guess I'll go with Ortiz. But that's not why I'm playing in fantasy.
Well, and kind of piggybacking on what you said earlier, Chris, how you like to monitor what the organization is doing, right? The Tigers gave this kid the money. I think that's important for me, but also within the Milwaukee organization, you have Bryce Wilson talking about Joey Ortiz as a generational player, which I think is a really nice compliment, but also probably not Mike Trout.
He needs to calm down.
But also with that being said too, I'm like, hey, they have high praise for him. Like they clearly see good things in him. Like we can scale it back to at least moderation there. But Joey Ortiz did have some really nice exit velocities while he was with AAA, while in the Baltimore organization. So there is more power to be had if they can pull it out of him. I think we've already started to see that a little bit this season. But Kieth definitely has, I think, the higher ceiling. But I love what Ortiz has done, and I think there's room to grow. I think there's a prospect that we didn't see there that you and I have kind of talked about, Doc, in the past.
He's got, and just throw this in there on Ortiz's side, he's actually got killer bat speed, like 85th percentile, which is, I love that. It's a great new metric to have. Another tool in the tool belt. And I was just alluding to before, Keith's, you look at his EVs and his bat speed, doesn't look spectacular, but I think Ross brought it up. Basically, Savant, it'll tell you what already happened. And of course, the expected stats, we can expect based on what happened, right? So it's, if he starts mashing bombs, I'm going to guess they're going to be higher EVs and more bats and probably higher bat speed. That'll be interesting to watch.
I think both of them. I think their average EVs and even their max, especially for Kieth, I think they're kind of being dragged behind. I think as they get more comfortable, as we saw Kieth this week, really starting to take form, having 3 home runs. Like the second half is going to be really important. I think secondly with Kieth, Detroit is cold as all hell. And we saw a lot of their players drag behind this year. Torkelson's in AAA because he couldn't turn it around. It gets cold there. It's cold in Cleveland. I think we have to give Detroit and Cleveland, AL Central guys a little bit more slack just because of the environment that they play in for the first bit of April and into May. Okay, next pairing up on the list. This one, I think if we had asked preseason, is a resounding obvious choice. Now things have gotten a little murkier. The next two on our list is James Wood or Wyatt Langford. Chris, who do you have?
We are putting together a midseason ranks at TDG, and I have Wood ahead.
Yeah.
I knew that would elicit some sort of response there. Small sample size, wow, right? But the fact that he's only struck out 7 times in his first 7 games, I think speaks a lot more. James Wood is who I'm talking about. Sorry. There's the delay in over the fence power from Wyatt. I'm not going to hold that against him too much. I just think James is showing that he's going to get close to that 90% outcome that we all dream about when we're ranking, when we're talking about these sort of things. I think it's everything that Wood showed as a gain in his approach this year in AAA in the first 7 games seems to be transferring over. And I think it's just a matter of time before everything else falls in place with him. I mean, it's really a great debate. Like if I had to choose between the two of them, you know, I'm not going to walk away upset with either of these guys. But James Wood will be ranked by me over Wyatt Langford for certain.
Doc, what do you think? Is it time? Are you moving on from Langford?
No. What? Don't even say the words. There's some sirens in the background, and dude, they need to come out to your house for that's some kind of slander. I don't know what that is. But you're under arrest. No, man, it's happening. It's happening, folks. In July, Wyatt Langford's got a talk about small sample size. He got 381 batting average, 480 OBP. But even what's his last 28 days, he's got a 412 OBP, 333 batting average. He's getting it together. Yeah, the over the fence power ain't quite there yet. But I think people like to make fun of spring training it never happened. I'm like, well, it definitely happened. Like he clearly has that's not an accident. Like you don't see a Jacob Wilson or a Luis Arias just randomly smacking 20 home runs in spring training, right? It still displays some power. His whole collegiate career, his whole professional small career he had in the minors, the power's there. And I'm just a believer in the Rangers because I'm just someone who has logic and reason behind them, I guess. Like we look at their team from last year, it's the same this year, but better. So it's very strange what's happened with them not winning as many games as we thought. I just still believe, I guess, it'll have to be September and they're out of playoff contention before me to really say it's not happening. But I see some signs. I think Wyatt Langford actually, it's not really fair to put that on him, but I think he might be that spark they need. And if you want to take one more thought here, is that it's kind of I think they're exactly the same age, 20. Or actually, no, Wyatt's a year older, but it's interesting. I wonder. Wyatt Langford only got a little bit of professional training in the last year. Even though James Wood is younger, maybe this is a whole other debate of a high school versus college bats, right? Wood has been training with professional organizations since 2021. With the Padres, but he's been. So I'm not sure. Maybe just having that extra seasoning, he's coming out hotter than Langford. Also, he's a physical freak at 6'7", 230. He's a stud. It's not like I'm sitting here saying James Wood sucks or anything. I'll be interested to see what happens. Wyatt Langford came out playing pretty solid to start. We'll see what happens when the league starts adjusting to Wood. But yeah, it's going to be a fun comparison. And man, we're gonna eventually see Jackson Holliday up here. It's a good time. It's funny. It's still I guess if we're eternal optimists, I think you have to be an eternal optimist to be a prospector, huh? Because I'm about to say it's a good time to be a prospector. I'm like, whoa, we've had so many busts this year, temporary downfalls of prospects. But it still feels we're starting to see some resurgences and some guys figuring it out. Turns out it's not the NFL. Guys, it's not like it's just a running back where you have the lane, you explode through it. It's a complicated game. Not to really knock.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's not easy, but baseball's tricky, man.
There's a lot of variables, right? We just talked about the weather being a variable. James Wood being 21, how would he have fared if they called him up on opening day after the concerns that we had with him coming into the season from his high strikeout profile last year? It could have been disastrous. They gave him the time in the minors. He got an opportunity to develop and change his approach. Here he is. We're comparing him to Langford. Well, Langford had to figure that out at the major league level. So, one of the many variables on top of what we just mentioned. I think it's interesting you mentioned, kind of the struggles of the Rangers. I just wanted to add Bruce Bochy had made a few comments over the last month, just exactly what it takes to win a World Series. And he had said you need to have the career years from a number of guys you were not expecting. And they got that last year. They have had nothing but injuries this season and underperformance, right? Corey Seager seems to be day to day, every other day, it seems like, unfortunately. You've had the injuries from Lowe. You've had injuries to, catching position. They
Or
have
just
had,
Simeon and Adolis Garcia have sucked.
yeah. I mean, Simeon's been
They can't
terrible.
suck.
Yeah. And I think Garcia probably turns it around with the weather changing. We'll probably see him go on a month stretch where he has 14 home runs, which is ridiculous. But his numbers will even out, in my opinion. But I just wanted to add that with the Rangers before we jumped on to
Well,
our
that
next.
gets you just to emphasize to the listener why we're mentioning that. Why does that matter? Counting stats. Do you want RBIs? You want runs?
Yeah.
I'm more confident in the Rangers at their peak in the short term than the Nationals.
Well, and I think it also goes into current numbers, right? Wyatt Langford went 4 for 5 last week. Wyatt Langford hit for the cycle a week or two ago. With Simeon struggling, with Seager out of the lineup, with Lowe struggling, with Garcia struggling, his numbers currently aren't as good as maybe they should be if this Rangers team was operating where we had expected them to be. We were talking about the number one prospect in baseball, kind of consensusly being Wyatt Langford coming to the year. And, if take Jackson Holliday out of the equation, and the expectation was an amazing lineup. Well, it just has not turned out that way. And he still had to fight through that.
And it turns out Paul Skeens was actually the number one prospect, and we didn't know.
And by quite a large margin as well. Okay, next up on the list. Now, this one's going to be fun. Chris, we're going to go ahead and go with Colt Emerson or Jackson Holliday.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer with Jackson Holliday still. It's interesting. I've never actually thought of comparing these two 1-to-1 like this. So when you sent me this, I was like, oh, that's a fun little this or that. Yeah, but it's Jackson Holliday. The skill sets are very similar. The positions might end up being somewhat similar defensively. You talk about the surrounding lineup. That's definitely Baltimore over Seattle, more than likely. It was a rough go, no doubt about it. But he's performing again at AAA. He, no doubt, is working his ass off, keeping this in the PG-13 realm. Working his ass off, trying to fix what went wrong horribly during that cup of coffee. So Jackson Holliday, no doubt.
Chris, are you concerned at all about the elbow inflammation? Is there any concern that maybe he'll need to have UCL surgery, or that this is in some way really stints his development?
Stints his development? No, I'm not. Okay. It could delay some of it if there is something else barking in there, but as a batter, he's not a pitcher by any means. They can move him to first base. Who knows? Yeah. But he'll still get it. His problem, from what I remember during that call up, wasn't anything defensively related. They had him at second base. I've heard rumors of maybe him moving even to third base if he came up again in the short term. I don't know if that could be taken off the cards now with the elbow, but the bat was the problem, and he's working to fix that. And the guy is obviously a hardworking kid, so I'll still take a Jackson Holliday. Okay,
Doc, you're a big advocate for Colt Emerson. You were very aggressive with him in draft season, FYPD season. Now that this question is raised, Emerson or Holliday, are you going to be bullish and choose the, basically this is a similar profile, probably a little bit more power in Emerson, but more bat in Holliday? Who would you rather have?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say Jackson Holliday, and I don't just have to say it, I want to say it. It's kind of like a really good outcome for Colt Emerson, who is just further behind in the development. If I want to play devil's advocate, maybe you can argue that Colt Emerson could have more power long term. He certainly has flashed some of that early on here. Both just elite hit tool guys you can get on base. It's crazy. Emerson is still 18, and if you look at his baseball reference picture, first of all, give the guy some better lighting. He looks like a serial killer, but he also looks older though. He looks noticeably older. He's got some little scruff going. He looks like he's kind of like maturing. Whereas remember, if you look at, I was trying to find pictures for Emerson on my top 100 lists. It's almost all from draft day or right before it. He looks like a child. He's got very much a baby face. Looks like very skinny, and you can see he's transforming in front of our eyes right here, and that's, I'm guessing, something to do with his power increase, which is exciting. And that's, nobody really, not nobody, but folks didn't really see that coming, and that's something that can happen with a high school draft pick. So very cool to see. My thing I want to see is him on the field. He keeps getting these little. It's tricky to stay on top of minor league.
He is back. He's back
Kind
with
of.
Modesto now.
He has not played since the 3rd of July. Like he came back, and I'm actually actively looking it up right now. Apparently they're saying there's no concern. It's just he's trying to ramp up. And
Say, what is it? So what was that? That would have been, he played Wednesday, but he had Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday off.
I don't know. It's there's just mysterious, man. So
Yeah.
if it was serious, I think we would have heard about it by now. He was hitting, I guess. If you want to look at the bright side, he was hitting. Had a couple hits in his last game.
I mean, he broke a bone in his foot, if I'm correct,
Okay.
right?
So
that was that could be an injury where he's feeling just something. There's just something going on, right?
This is not something I'm freaking out about long term, but not like Chase DeLauder where it's like an endless thing. If it becomes an endless thing, then okay, I guess he's one of those guys, and that's terrible for baseball because he seems like he's got a very high upside. As of right now, it's just annoying because when you're injured at these critical periods of development, it just means it's going to take a little longer, especially with Seattle, who seems to have no problem accelerating their pitchers to the bigs, but loves babying their bats. It's just and hopefully they trade them. I want these guys off of Seattle. I don't want them in that park. I want them to be in wherever, Cincy or. And honestly, just really a high octane offense in a cool park would be nice because there's so many fun bats there, and they'll get it done in Seattle if that's where they go. Especially a guy like with guys with freakish power like Montez, or if Emerson gets there. But yeah, to answer your question, very political answer. But Jackson Holliday, I barely talked about it. I just think he's a stud. If he came up and he was just super average, I think that's what a lot of people's fears are with Holliday, is that he's going to just be average. He'll get like 15 and 15 with some decent ratios. I don't know about that. I said it before here. I think he'll either maintain that really good speed and be like a 20 home run, 30 stolen base guy, which is great with amazing ratios. So maybe a bit of a Trey Turner vibe. And then, or he gets more of his dad's build and get in bulk, and he becomes more of a power bat, maybe at the cost of some speed. Regardless, you're winning because the ratios I think will be very good. And I think he's an all-out hitter, which is like, yeah, you want that Jacob Wilson hit tool with some more fun on the side.
Yeah, I think you said it perfectly. Go ahead, Chris.
You had mentioned that Emerson's 18. I think he's about to turn 19. This is his first full season, right? Post-draft year. What did Holliday do his first full draft season, or first full year after his draft year? He went from low A to triple A in the same year. I mean, it just boom, 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 boom progressed. So he's not like some over the hill batter either. I don't think he's even legally allowed to drink yet. So,
well, people are so fast to write him off. Like, same with Langford. Right before he hit the cycle, the day of the cycle, I had a guy on Twitter telling me, "I'm just not seeing it with Langford. Are you sure I should hold him?" I said, "Yeah, dude, he's been doing a little better lately." Then he hit the cycle. I said, "My brother in Christ, you will hold on to him. I will be. Give me the password to your account. I'm making sure you don't trade him.
Yeah,
don't cut him. Who's gonna cut him?"
Well, and Doc, you had said it. I think when we look at Emerson, the 90th percentile outcome, right? The best case scenario that we're hoping for is that he turns into what Jackson Holliday already is today, as people are disappointed in him as a 20-year-old. But I do think it's an interesting question. The reason I paired them up together is because, Chris, you kind of alluded to it. There's a lot of similarities, at least for the surface level interpretation of what they are as prospects and future big leaguers. Then you go into Jackson Holliday being the former #1 prospect, and everything that goes into his profile. It should be obvious. It's obvious to you, both of you two, and to me as well. I'm taking Jackson Holliday, no questions asked. But I do think people have soured, and I think there's a buying opportunity where if you have a guy like Emerson, maybe you'll package him up with somebody else and go get yourself Jackson Holliday. where again, that thought preseason would have been ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
All right, last two we have on the list, last pairing. And we're going to go pitcher here. Christian Scott, who is currently pitching and pitching pretty well against the Pittsburgh Pirates. And then Drew Thorpe for the White Sox. Doc, obviously, we love Thorpe. Chris, who are you taking, Christian Scott or Drew Thorpe?
Yeah, this is another good combo here. So my hat's off on these options. I am going to go Christian Scott. Not just the new hip name, and not because he's pitching super early today, but I'm kind of wary about change up first starting pitchers from a fantasy perspective. And then additionally, I mean, it's just right now the rage is that fastball paired with the slider or sweeper, and he's able to locate both of those. So Scott, they both are control artists, I guess, or command artists, but I just think ultimately Scott has a better fantasy friendly profile with the K's, and long term also the Mets. And now I'm blanking on the new GM that they poached from the Brewers, and it's completely
David Stearns, right? David Stearns.
Yep. The magic he did with Milwaukee and their pitching development and crafting that. It seems that, yes, they've drafted a lot of these guys, including Scott, before Stearns, but I think he'll probably be able to craft an org development similar to in quality to what he did with the Brewers. And so I think Scott is just kind of like the tip of that. Obviously, we're not comparing orgs here and who would we rather take, but I just think that I trust the Mets in maximizing Scott's talents versus the White Sox in maximizing Thorpe's.
Yeah, great summary. I think that last bit there is a perfect representation of what you were getting at. And for David Stearns, I mean, those that don't know that are listening, Milwaukee did invest in a pitching lab in their spring training facility that was in the David Stearns tenure. You're starting to see pop-up prospects throughout the organization and within Milwaukee, really dominating some of the metric numbers. I think a lot of that is in relation to their pitching lab and the investment they made that you kind of talked about, Chris. David Stearns made that an emphasis in Milwaukee. I would imagine he will also make that an emphasis in New York. Doc, this is going to be a harder question, I think, for you. We both like Thorpe a lot. You like Thorpe. Is it Scott for you, or are you taking Thorpe?
I think I'm taking Thorpe. And I think that Scott probably has higher upside, probably long term. I think Thorpe is, I was a little bit nervous after, everyone has a little bit, who was a Thorpe fan was a little nervous after that Arizona start. But I saw some people they were ready to throw him under the bus right away. His first bad start in the bigs. Lovio's never going to make it. Nope, can't do it. And I'm over here like, buddy, let's just wait it out. And we're seeing some great starts. I'm thinking, like, people like to think, like, they like to act like Logan Webb doesn't exist. They like to act like Justin Steele doesn't exist. These guys are killer, man. Like, one of my teams, I'm just, like, accumulating this team of underdog studs who are low velo guys, but they're old school pitchers. And there's a couple reasons behind that. One, they're usually the guys who they're going to give you quality starts. They're going to be efficient. They're going to draw a lot of. I'm looking at it's the small sample size, right? But Drew Thorpe's average exit velocity, it looks like on the Savant, it looks like it's 100th percentile. It looks like it's 99. It's not. There's no number on it because it's not qualified, but it's at the extreme red. His barrel percentage, his hard hit percentage, they're all up there. His expected ERA is 3.50. I mean, we forget that even a guy like Miles Mikolas is actually a two-time All-Star, which is insane because he doesn't feel like it when you see some of his blow-ups out there. But I think Mikolas. It's crazy to say two-time All-Star is the floor, so it doesn't feel right. But there's something would be, if you include his volatility, I guess Mikolas is a floor. Mikolas is also like 36, so there's not really any upside to go.
I think Mikolas too was. I
watch the Cardinals all the time, still calling him Mikolas. It's just never going to change.
Is it Mikolas or is it Mikolas?
I think it's Mikolas, dude.
It's Mikolas. Okay, I thought so. I think he was an Asian league guy too, right? Either Japan or Korea. He came, right? He reworked himself and came back like Fetty, but before.
Yeah. So my gut going back to Scott, my gut says, oh, a guy who's already able to, sit in the mid 90s, if he can, if Scott can, ramp up. As much as I like the low velo control command guys, I think that they're more sustainable. It's my personal. I don't have the data here. I do suspect though that their arms are less likely to fall off. That's a serious thing. That's a serious thing in the dynasty league, guys, because I don't want to lose my pitcher for 2 years. Yuri Perez seems like a lot of fun. Hope I get to use him one day. Andrew Painter, I was so excited. Oh, hope I get to see him one. Hope he sticks around. I don't really have those fears. It can happen to anyone. It's not like these guys. Logan Webb said it. He's like, I'm not trying to be low velo. I would love to rip gas. It works, but so it's not like these guys aren't throwing as hard as they basically can. But I would believe they're more throwing what they should. And so, and Logan Webb is a sinker baller as opposed to Thorpe's four-seamer. But what's happening with Thorpe right now is what I was hoping, and what we heard was that it's tunneling well. His four-seamer is starting to tunnel well with the changeup. So basically, they come and looking the same, and just a little different. So, and when you're throwing in the low 80s, some of Thorpe's pitches here, his slider's okay. I'd love to see him. If he's got 5 pitches he's throwing, kind of. It's really a lot of four-seam changeup. But if he can just get a really cool sweeper, or slider, or get those ones into the cutter seems like it's not very good. But if you can get those to just grade up a little bit, I think there's a fun ceiling here. And in the meantime, yeah, when you're throwing low 80s and then you see 90, he can get up. I've seen him I think up to 93 on the fastball. So he's not J.D. Moyer.
You're talking about Thorpe?
People act like he's throwing absolutely nothing. He throws the same speed as Justin Steele. So if he gets that four-seamer up in the right location after, peppering in some a vicious changeup in the low 80s, then it plays up. So I still go Thorpe long term. I just go Thorpe in general, but I think I could see why Christian Scott's ceiling, because he also has great command, could be higher.
Yeah, well, and Chris, you and Drew talked
2 years
about,
older though. Scott's 2 years older. I'll throw that in there.
Yeah, he does have the college, he was drafted a year earlier. Chris, you and Drew talked about Carson Whisenhunt on one of the recent podcasts, and you had mentioned how you don't love a changeup being even the second pitch for a player. I mean, for Thorpe, it's his first pitch, right? It's his number one pitch. So that's kind of why I tossed him on the list, because I know that Whisenhunt had an amazing year last year, but when you and Drew talked about it, you were both spot on. Like he struggled this year. He hasn't found that third pitch, and here is Thorpe at the major league level dominating with a changeup first. I do think it's just a bit of an anomaly. He's more of an anomaly, I think, than the pitch in general. But Christian Scott is currently pitching nice. I will say, just from an eye test, I do think Scott has more upside, but it looks like when he's throwing, it looks like he's putting every ounce into that throw, and that just scares me a little bit. But Doc, you said anyone can get hurt these days. It doesn't necessarily matter.
He looks like a bulldog out there. He's got those big shoulders. He just looks like I'm just
very
an old
controlled
school
too.
Knucklehead scout. He just looks like a baseball player, and I stand by it.
Yeah, that comes over the GM's desk. It looks like a baseball player. Draft him. Okay.
Dude,
okay.
Up until Moneyball, that was I'm positive those guys are still there. They didn't lose their jobs. They didn't all get fired overnight. In fact, they're mad at the data guys.
Yeah, they're having an internal war.
The stat line. I'm incorporating both.
I love that. Okay, 2 more segments. Maybe we'll cancel the last segment. I wanted to really quick talk college with you, Chris, before we get you off today. This college class.
Get him off! Come on, dude.
I was trying to keep it
R-rated.
We've really gone into what are those books? They're the books at the 1990s, 1980s with Fabio on them.
No, yeah.
There's the romance books. We've really gone into our romance segments today. But Chris, steering back to college baseball, we have a fun class this year. Travis Bazzana, Charlie Condon, and JJ Weatherhold is some of the biggest impact bats. I think you could toss Jack Caglione into that mix. These guys are going to be headlining the FYPD this year, whether that comes this July after the draft or this offseason. But out of this grouping, who do you think has the best shot of being not only an impact bat for a dynasty player and manager, but maybe a game-changing bat sooner than later?
Well, I mean, I would probably lean Condon for game-changing bat. Weatherholt's 2024 was not quite what his 2023 was. And Bazana is kind of more of a jack of all, and doesn't seem to have that game, in my opinion, have that game changing. I'll be honest, I am only top level familiar with a lot of these college names so far. I spend a lot more time watching minor leagues, paying attention to minor leagues, watching major leagues, paying attention to major leagues in college. So I'm a headline only kind of guy when it comes to that college stuff. But I mean, it was hard to ignore what Condon did this year. And that seems to be some game-changing power. I'm excited to see where all these guys end up here in the draft and what orgs they get. That factors into my assessment, which orgs take them, draft them.
Yeah.
But I would lean Condon at this point of everything.
Okay. I think that's a great point that you made. Organizational positioning matters, right? And depending on if they fall with the Guardians or the Reds or Colorado, those are important pieces. And then second question, kind of staying in college, and you kind of said, surface level. I think that's a lot of us within the industry until we really get to FYPD research. Chase Burns, coming out of Vanderbilt, formerly of Tennessee, going to be probably the number one pitcher off the board. Are you excited to maybe get an opportunity for him in FYPD, or do you have more concerns because of the reliever risk? And we don't have the Rhett Lauder, Paul Skeens profile at the top of the pitching ranks this year.
Yeah. If I'm picking early in an FYPD, I typically will lean bat. I mean, even this year is probably. I know I'm not alone. I don't want to say I faded Skeens, but with the top 3 pick, I was not taking Skeens this year, which obviously in hindsight does not.
Hindsight sucks, yeah.
Yeah. So it really, at this point, I could see Burns probably will end up being a top 5 pick, I imagine, in most FYPDs. But do I think he'll have value next year? I think that comes down to org and opportunity more than anything. Just because someone has reliever risk, though, I don't think that's necessarily a fade. I get where that would, it's not if you're like, oh, I'm going to be between these two generic concepts of a ace level starting pitcher or a lights out level closer, you're going to go with the starter. But we talked about how many prospects in our top 50 fade away earlier, right? How many FYPD picks never make it to any sort of level of relevance?
Yeah.
So if someone's being pegged early with some reliever risk, I don't get too concerned about that necessarily in the big picture of everything when scoping them out. And if we want them to have an impact, they're more likely going to get called up sooner as a reliever, right? I mean, even Waldrop's, that was his big knock, and that moved him all the way down to number 10 overall in your average ADP for FYPDs. So, and that ended up being not what happened, right? He came up as a starter, so initially, and then got hurt. But I think Burns will probably be a top 5 FYPD pick unless some random act of who knows happens in between now and draft time. But
yeah, no, and I think too, to the point that you were just saying, I think it's easy to discount pitching because when you have to make those decisions, Skins, I think, was a little bit of an outlier as well. It's like, do you really want to pass up Dylan Cruz for Paul Skeens 10 years from now and look back and Paul Skeens, was Mick Appel, or he was Brady Aiken. He was a guy that just never made it, right? And you have to think, man, I could have had a starting outfielder, or I could have had a starting second baseman, right? I could have had JJ Weatherholt, but instead I took Burns. And Burns is now the closer for Colorado. Like, great. So I do think there's a lot to go in there. Doc, we haven't talked college at all yet. I think we're going to talk probably more next week after my article comes out. Did you have any input on Bazana, Condon, Weatherholt, Chase Burns? Was there anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah. I mean, I'm starting. It's starting to build for me in terms of I haven't been paying tons of attention. There's some great accounts out there on the Twitter X that I've been in it all year, and I appreciate them because, yeah, the surface level, I've been able like that name keeps coming up. I've seen a 50 home runs from this Condon guy. It's like, okay, he's probably good. Here's the deal. So the Weatherholt seems like a very very different profile. He's a little bit smaller, not as many home runs. So I wouldn't for fantasy purposes. I'm looking at guys like I'm interested to see what Chris said is the org, and it matters a lot. There's Bazana, who I did not know was Australian until right now. I don't know how that slipped by, which is kind of cool. As patriotic American as I am, it's still cool. What's his face? My goodness, Condon. And then there's Caglione, who's another guy. And then there's also people seem to be not talking about him. And I remember hearing about this guy last year.
You gonna bring up Kurtz?
Nick Kurtz, and he's listed at 6'5". I thought could have sworn he's like 6. Doesn't even matter. He's huge. These guys are big boys. And he's having a fine year himself. So, and they all have cartoon numbers, or video game numbers. So I don't think it's almost harder to figure out who's the real deal here. I'll have to dig into that scout talk. That's where it comes in handy when the college numbers are all the same. And again, where they land. And I'll tell you, some of these teams are fun. So you can see, it could easily be trades. I'll go through the top 8 spots, because that's just the first line here. Cleveland, I hope they trade away. I actually wouldn't be surprised if they trade away or if they take a pitch. I don't know if they could take a pitcher there because there's so many. So the bats seem like they're such high.
Can they trade picks now?
No, you can only trade
competitive balance.
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, my bad. I could have sworn I heard. Or maybe they draft the player and then trade him? Yeah.
After he's signed, yes.
Okay, so it's complicated. I don't know. I just have a hard time seeing Cleveland taking a big power bat. And then, it's worth mentioning as well, the Skeens thing. There were 2 people who were avoiding Skeens, or not avoiding, but picking one of these other studs. One was people who I hope none of you were, people worried about the shape of his fastball. It was not that guy. But there was a lot of us who had the much more merit is the bats are typically safer. And with Tommy John running rampant, and the guy throwing so fast, I didn't really have that concern as much. With Skeens is always a concern, but he's just built. He looks like he's built for it. Like it's a natural as triple digit he can get. He's got it. And so I like his makeup. I think he's a baseball guy. And so
are you talking about Burns here, Chase Burns?
No, I'm talking about Paul Skeens.
Okay.
And so I think he was, in terms of people, passing up him for Cruz. I think that one's going to hurt a lot. I don't think I'm going to really hurt too much taking Langford. I do think he's a stud. I don't like to use generational too often, so I won't right now. But there is that upside in there. So I guess I did use the word. But here's the teams real quick. Cleveland. Hey, maybe they go rogue and take a pitcher. These guys don't always listen to us or MLB pundits or anyone. Sometimes they go off grid. They go with who they think is best. So Cleveland, I don't know. Maybe they go with Weatherholt. They like the less sexier guys, it seems. But then there's some really fun options here. So Cincinnati, what a fun park for any of these power hitters. Rockies sucks for development, but really fun park. A's, if they stick around in Sacramento for a few years, that's a very cool park to hit some home runs out of. Sox, bad development, fun park. Royals, up, that's exciting because they could imagine them with a really, really fun power bat. Their arms have actually surprised this year. Either way, they could go either way, and that team seems like it's got some good vibes. It's ascending. Cardinals, they're actually competing this year, and they always seem to kind of I don't know. They could use one of these studs, power bats.
If Burns falls to 6,
the last one is just the Angels, where I don't want anyone going to the Angels because I care about them, but they'll be in the big leagues tomorrow, so there's that. What were you trying to say there, Matt? I had to steal that.
No, it's good. Instead of Chase Burns somehow falls to 6, I could see him up this year as a reliever.
Wow,
he did put a lot of innings. I mean, the Cardinals, they kind of fight normal rationale with prospects, right? Like Jordan Walker's in the minor leagues. Like we don't love what they've done with prospects. I could see them pulling a Garrett Crochet and calling him up immediately.
Quinn Matthews would be first. I think.
Yeah, for sure. But I think Burns is ready to. I think he's ready to have 20 appearances at 20 innings at the major league level. I mean, he's just a different kind of pitcher than Skeens was. He more has the Garrett Crochet when Garrett Crochet was at Tennessee, where it's like he just has that fastball that's going to eat you alive.
So you're very high on Chase Burns, is what I'm getting here.
I think Chris made a really good point. I think Burns is the perfect example of a guy that no matter if he is a closer, a 2 to 3 inning bullpen guy, or he's a starter, he's going to be the best pitcher on your team. He just has the best stuff. The problem is, like, Burns wasn't very good at Tennessee, but Tennessee kind of tossed him around, put him in the bullpen. They put him as a starter. They put him back in the bullpen. This year at Wake Forest, he absolutely dominated, but he doesn't have that same package that Skeens has.
What about Hagen Smith?
Hagen Smith had Tommy John as a sophomore in high school. I wouldn't touch him. That scares the hell out of me.
7 years, man.
He got it out of
yeah,
his
absolutely, Chris. So that's a long time ago, and like you're talking about a kid that I'm going to invest a top 10 pick in, maybe that could have his second TJ before 25. That's terrifying.
Were you going to say something there, Chris?
Well, I'm just saying at that 7-year mark, post any Tommy John is this red flag, day away sign. I was trying to. Luzardo was one of my big concerns this year. Not saying he needs Tommy John by any means, but it seems to be this window of health consistently that let's just 6 to 8 years post Tommy John, where it just always feels like it falls apart for these big effort type guys. So Hagen Smith did not know he already had a Tommy John on the docket. So thank you for that one.
Yeah, no, and I thought he had 2. I was positive for a while he had 2 because I knew of the one after his sophomore year in high school. I thought it was incredible that he even made it to college. I mean, you think about like that's 2 years, not even a full season on the prep circuit. Hagen Smith had. He was able to come back from Tommy John and ultimately become a top 10 draft pick. Like, that's incredible. And I think the modern medicine that we talk about and just the feats that we're having now, that these kids aren't completely losing their college, what's what I'm looking for here, opportunity because they're getting injured in high school.
Well,
go ahead.
You know, it's more important than what you're going to say. Hagen Smith has he's going for the Doc flow look, so that boosts him up a few scout points. He's got that long.
He's got the flow going. I mean, listen, DeGrom had it.
And Chase Burns is a weird dude too. He's got a funny situation. So I'm not sure if you checked him out. I'm guessing he's a military kid. Otherwise, his parents are just world travelers. But he's a black dude from the South, born in Italy, which is like not something you hear every day. And now
you're right. That's got to be military.
It's just it's like I love that those unique. I think Brendan Donovan was born in Germany. So
interesting.
Yeah,
and Bazana was assumed. I'm going to assume he was Australian.
I don't think America has base. Or I don't think that there's a lot of military presence in Australia. Could be wrong, but
no. Bazana is. I'm pretty sure he's Australian because, like you said, he did play in Australia.
Yes, and Donovan was born in Würzburg, Germany, but he went to school in Mobile, Alabama. So, yeah, these guys. It's funny, man. These both similar stories actually with Burns and.
Well, and it's, bringing up the military aspect for Burns. We talked about that a lot with Skeens and the time that he had. When was he at Navy or was he at Army? Doc, do you remember?
He was Air Force. Yeah.
Air Force. Okay, that's right. The one I didn't mention.
3rd time's a charm.
I think that's important, right? We talked about what we liked with that military regimen and what he was used to, and I think we see it. Like he's very controlled. He's very poised for his age. There's a lot of things that I think we could equate to discipline. In that profile, and if Burns has any of those things, that would be, or was around any of those things, would be a positive. Last thing I wanted to mention to you guys, the Bat Bros did a awesome video last week, and I wanted to bring it up because there is a recent bat that was banned in youth sports. The 2024 Easton Hyper Fire. This is a -5 bat that they were swinging. College is a -3. The reason I brought it up, though, is because the drastic difference in exit velocities that they showed within their video. Again, a -5 to a -3, you're going to have a jump in 2 to 3 miles per hour in exit velo automatically. The speed, the bat of the speed and the bat of the swing for a -5 is going to be faster than -3. But the differences were pretty incredible. For the Hyperfire, it was 120 miles per hour off his bat. When he went with a traditional wood bat, it was 103. So we're talking about 17 miles per hour difference in exit velocity. If we shave off the 2 to 3, we'll say 117 to 103. It's still a 14 miles per hour exit velocity drop. So when we're talking about Condone's numbers, Bazana's 25, 26 home runs this year, Weatherholt's home runs, that's a lot. 14 miles per hour going to the pros. And I think we saw a lot of that with Wyatt Langford so far this year. Just kind of a small piece I wanted to throw at you guys and see if you guys had anything to add to that.
Well, those are obviously too many numbers for my brain. I have the color commentator folks, not the data analyst. So Chris, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I think we often get caught up. You mentioned all the Twitter voices, and this is by no means any slight against them, but for the average Twitter scroller like myself, when it comes to the college names, I see, oh, Condon hit another home run. Oh, Bazana hit another home run. And then you see these totals and you're like, holy cow, there 60 home runs in college as a career, and you start to get numb to the fact that they have metal bats.
Yeah.
So I think, I can't crunch those kinds of numbers on impacts, but I think everyone needs to keep in mind they have metal bats, and you'll hear that brought up, but it's going to be a reduction. You're not going to get necessarily a 30 home run season as a first full professional year from a college graduate or a college draftee that you were expecting, supposedly based off of your Twitter research.
And in all seriousness, I think that hits the nail on the head. I would also say, though, that you're not, like I said before, you're not accidentally getting 30 plus home runs no matter what bat you're using. Some people will go too far with it and be like, oh yeah, Wyatt Langford, he mashed all those bombs before. Yeah, it was all just make believe because the bat's a magic bat. Like, well, where are the other college kids doing that, right? So yeah, of course it makes a difference, and of course we shouldn't expect a direct comparison. But I would say the only time or not the only time, the one that stands out the most to me in terms of college metal bat to wooden bat is Chase Davis of the Cardinals. He honestly looked like he was completely, falling apart. He looked like he was basically not going to make it. It's early on, but he was doing really terribly. Chase Davis of the Cardinals, the prospect from their first round pick last year. But even then, his last 30 days, he's back up. He's got 300 average, 463 OBP.
Yeah, he's bouncing back.
Still only 4 home runs. Great buy low, by the way. I'm thinking of making a post about him because I think everyone's forgotten. And I actually had him cut in kind of a deep league. I'm not sure. Are you in the Dynasty Guru Dynasty League, Chris? Of course you are, right? Oh, we got Chris on mute.
Did we lose
here.
Chris?
Well, Chris is doing his thing. We've been going pretty long anyway, so I would just end it with typically, reduce your expectations. Don't necessarily expect all these kids to hit 40 home runs, but understand that the power means something would be what I take away from it.
All right, everyone. We have taken enough of your time today. We wanted to say thank you and say thank you to Chris Knock as well from Dynasty Guru. Chris, it was awesome having you on today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. It was a pleasure. I finally get to see you guys face to face. I'll sleep easy tonight.
Doc, anything else for us?
I'm your Huckleberry.
Thank you so much, everyone. We will see you next week.